Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I'm going to be looking at a genreless system that I have wanted to review for a long time. This is my look at Savage Worlds. Let's roll it. Now, as I said in the opening, Savage Worlds is a genreless system. There are different setting books that are printed for it, and these will add things like different character options and their own bestiaries and some slight differences in mechanics. But really, it's all going to fit together in that Savage Worlds core framework. So it's a really nice plug and play setup where you can throw just about any genre you want at the game and it's going to take it up just fine. It's a nice, really cool idea. Now, the book itself is not that large. It's only 6.5 by 10 inches. I have just learned that this is called Royal Octavo, and this is your factoid for the day. Royal Octavo is because you have octavo, you print 8 pages on one side of a sheet, another 8 pages on the other side of the sheet, and together you get 16 pages before you cut and fold. The Royal is just the page size. You can have octavo, a whole bunch of different versions of octavo. Royal refers to 6.5 by 10. Why? Who knows? It's a quirk of printing that has been passed on through history. But the book is really cool. It is only 208 pages, and at that size, it feels a lot shorter than it actually is just by picking it up. There's no book ribbon in it, even though, if you look, it is stitched binding. I am a little disappointed by that. I love my book ribbons. It's not really a knock on the book. It just doesn't fit for what they were trying to do. So you just need to have a bookmark handy or a tissue or some other form of paper handy when you are reading through the book, and you're fine. I do love my book ribbons though. The cover art, as you can see, is beautiful. It is very much in the vein of Indiana Jones and other adventure stories. It gives you that sense that you are traveling through the world into kind of a parallel reality where things that have long been forgotten are now being discovered and are going to attempt to stop you from achieving your goals. One of the nice things that I like about the cover is that it is reprinted on the interior cover page. So you get the full wraparound effect with not being broken by the spine and no titles. You can see all that's going on here. I love this idea. In fact, I would love it if they would put out a poster or send you a poster in a special bundle to be able to hang this on a wall. It is really, really nice. All told, the book is easy to pick up and read, although I will give it one small ding. It is glossy paper. You can kind of see that up here. There you go. I have it, my light's angled a little bit so you can actually see it for the review. The gloss is going to give you a lot of glare when there's a strong or direct light source nearby. It can make it more difficult to read. When I was outside on my back porch, which is a covered porch in fact, the way that the light was reflecting in from the sun, it made me had to continually shift my angle in order to stop glare so I could see the text. So Savage Worlds makes use of heavy skeuomorphic design. Some pages, like this summary page here, are going to have a crumpled paper texture. Titles and headers, they're all going to have a torn paper texture behind it. Footers use that as well, down here with the page number, and even the chapter titles are going to use things like faux paper clips and scotch tape in order to hold stuff onto the page. Most of the industry has moved away from skeuomorphic design to flat design. And there are people who might consider that a more modern and fresh look. But for Savage Worlds, that skeuomorphic design, it fits. It makes the game feel adventurous, like you're reading a dossier of some sort of agency that's sending you out on a mission. I like it for this book, even if I don't typically like the design language in general. It fits for Savage World, and I'm actually glad they used it. But the only thing I wish they would remove is that crumpled paper texture for some of the pages, particularly for summary pages. It does occasionally have the markings of that background image interfere with reading the text. That's something that's going to happen with just about any texture that you put on a page. It's a very difficult thing to do. And when you try to use something that looks like, a real world object, that collision between what you're trying to present in the text and the look of the book is going to hit a lot more often than not. So that's about the only skeuomorphic element that I like pulled out from it. I love the headers and the footers though. So the headers, as I said, and the footers are going to have that torn paper look to it. And on the left page of the outside margin, because the headers are not actually at the heading of the page, you're going to have the title of the book. Over here on the right page, you're going to have the current chapter title. But the chapter title is not always on that level. If you look at the side of the book, you can see, almost like file folders, how the color on that edge is going to descend throughout the book. And this is because as the chapter titles move, you're going to see that go down. So every time that right page header changes its level on the page, you've changed to a different section. That is a really, really good design, a great visual cue to tell you that you flipped to a different chapter. I appreciate it very much. And the footers are very, very simple. It's just a red torn paper image with white text on it, really good contrast, and the only information in the footer is the page number. It is simplicity personified, and it stands out. I really like it. So the fonts are very clean. The body text is a nice weight serif that handles both bold and italic faces really well. And the heading fonts are really nice. It's this cool, distinct sans serif font that is all capital letters with some really distinctive glyphs. And my favorite by far is the G. There's just something about it that stands out, that it speaks to me. It says, I'm cool. And I say, yes, I'm geeking out about font choices. I am not a normal person. You should have figured this out by now. Tables also have a really nice design. There is a nice alternating row color that provides great contrast. Row headers are white text on a black background, and the table title is actually included inside the design of the table itself. I love when people actually go about designing their tables this way. And it's going to be this nice red color, the same that's done for the headers and for the footers, with white text as the table title. It's a really cool element. I also loved that tables all have rounded corners so that it almost feels like you could pick up this table from the book and hand it to someone as a card. It's a really cool design. Tables can also occasionally have subheaders in them. That's going to be a very thin black row with a white sans serif font, very tiny in it. Might have liked to seen that increased a little bit or changed up just a tad, but it is a really good way of breaking up different sections of a table. Chapter titles are fully skeuomorphic. They even have that aforementioned paperclip and scotch tape trying to keep these elements on the page. And the chapter title itself is going to be printed on what looks to be torn out spiral bound notebook paper. You can see kind of a faded map in the background. Again, I lean more towards modern flat design, but this is really cool for this style of book. It gives you the feel that they're going for, and I like it. Interestingly enough, examples utilize a flat design. You're going to have the typical heading font here. It's now going to be a darker blue with matching thick lines above and below that heading area with a flat light blue texture behind it. I like this idea because there's a visual cue inside the design of the book itself that tells you this is something different. It's not in the same vein as the rest of the text. It's really neat. And another interesting feature about the book are these handwritten notes. Some of these are from players who appear in the examples that are found throughout the book, and some are from the GM who is writing a note to themselves. Is this silly? Sure. Is it gimmicky? Yep. but please give me more of it, because whenever I came across these notes, I felt like I was involved in a conversation, and it helped me want to continue reading the book to see what those asides were going to say as I moved through. Really cool, and it's a nice way to highlight different elements of the book to say, hey, this is important. So the artwork in this book is very good, and it is plentiful. And because it is a genreless system, there are a whole bunch of different genres which are represented throughout the work. Now, there are a whole bunch of different artists who are doing the different pieces that are in this book, but they held on to a similar design language throughout its run. It's a really nice trick to pull off. Now, I think similarly to my Cipher System review, there was no art in this book that made me go, oh, wow. Part of that is because I'm trying to learn the system, so I'm not appreciating the art aesthetic as much as I'm trying to see how the information is conveyed and what they're using to convey that. And part of it, I think it's just because it is a genreless system. They don't have the time to develop that ethos for one particular view of a world. They have to give you snapshots of a whole bunch of different worlds. All in all, it's pretty to look at, don't get me wrong. You're going to enjoy flipping through and seeing what the artwork is. Page 55 gives you a wonderful character creation summary that gives you the process through which you design your own character. It starts out with concept, which is essentially the archetype that you're going for. This is as close to the concept of class as Savage World gets. Then you have to choose your race, which is important because a race will give you innate abilities, it'll change your size, or even give you an ability to have a higher maximum or lower maximum ability score. This is what other games are changing at this point to heritage or ancestry. I'm wondering if Savage Worlds is going to make a similar shift, because inside the book itself right now, it actually points out that your race could also be your cultural background. So there is that sense that there's a wider concept here other than the traditional Western concept of race. One of the key concepts of having your race are these things called hindrances. These are role-playing elements for the game, not necessarily mechanical. But you take them on, and they could be minor or major, 1 point or 2 points of hindrances that you can take for your race. And there's a reason to take them. If you take 2 hindrance points, you're able to choose an edge for your character of your choice. That's really a nice feature. An edge is a special ability. We'll talk about those in a little bit. If you take up 1, you can give yourself another skill point to spend, so you can maybe buy a higher level skill, or you can have double the starting income in order to buy equipment, which in my read through doesn't seem like such a great benefit, but it might for folks who have played Savage Worlds before. Traits are a character's natural ability scores, and there are 5 of them. Let me read them for you. Agility, smarts, spirit, strength, and vigor. Now, each trait is given a die of 1d4 at start, and a character gets 5 points in order to raise the die levels up in each of the ability scores. 6 is considered to be human average, in case you were wondering. It costs 1 point per increase of die in order to get something higher. So you can give yourself 1 die type in each of those abilities and just be average Joe human all across the board, or you can take a hit on one and go up a little further in some other ability scores and become exceptional in one particular physical ability. It's an interesting concept. There's a lot of give and take with it. Skills are learned, and characters start with a D4 and 5 core abilities. Let's read them. Athletics, common knowledge, notice, persuasion, and stealth. Once you have those set on your page, you're given 12 points to either increase the values for those 5 core skills or buy new skills that will give you access to different options inside gameplay. I like this. This is my first real encounter besides Open Legend with point-buy systems, and I like it. It's kind of fun. There are also derived stats in this game which come from other parts of your character. They are pace, which is your speed, and this is going to be impacted by your character's size. Parry is your defense number. It is literally the target number for your character to be hit, and you generate your parry score by taking the number 2 plus 1/2 your fighting die type. So if you have a D8 as your fighting ability, you're going to take 2 and half of that, which is 4, and your parry score is 6. That's kind of fun. Toughness is your damage threshold. You're going to take 2 and again take 1/2 of your vigor die type, and that's going to be your toughness score. In order to affect a character with an attack, whether it's your PC or one of the NPCs in the game, you're going to have to roll in order to beat the character's toughness score. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in combat. So by now you should see that every skill and every attribute has a die type assigned to it. And when you are making a skill or an ability check, you're going to roll that die for the check. Anything above a 4 is going to be considered a success. And if you roll further above that, another 4 or any multiple 4 over that, you're going to be given what's considered to be a raise. And the raise will give you added benefits to what you are trying to do. One of the things as you read through Savage Worlds, there's a whole lot of playing card lingo and even playing card mechanics that exist inside this game. That's because of the first setting that it was designed for. It was an Old West. So the core mechanic seems very simple, right? Yeah, but it's a little bit more involved than that. Because wild card characters like significant NPCs or all the PCs, and there's your language again of playing cards, they get a wild die to roll. And it's usually a D6. So the character is going to roll their ability or their skill trait and roll it, and they're going to roll their wild die and roll it and take the higher number, usually. And any die which rolls the max value on its die type, that's called an ace. Playing card lingo again. It explodes. You get to roll it again and add that new number to your original total. If you continue to come up aces with your dice, you get to continually add that number. That's how you're going to get something like multiple raises on any sort of check. It's an interesting game. There's some math involved in it, but I like the mechanic. Bennies also influence the way that your character attempts are handled. Because if you spend a Benny, by the way, Benny is considered to be or explained to be American slang for benefits, which I literally have never heard in any kind of conversation at all, although one of my friends who works in higher level management says it's a common term among HR types. If you spend a Benny, you're allowed to re-roll any of your dice except for a 1, because a 1 is always automatically a critical failure. Now, most of the rules are going to stay the same for combat, except, as I've already mentioned, the target number for an attack is the target's parry score. Their toughness score is going to be there, and if there is a number that's in parentheses next to it, that's going to be their armor score. It explains how much of their armor is absorbing damage, and at that point, if you're using an armor-piercing weapon, you ignore those points in order to inflict a wound or damage onto the target. It's a neat little system. Initiative is drawn. You have a standard 52-card playing deck. You keep the jokers in, and initiative happens in numerical order depending on your suit. It goes from spades to hearts to diamonds to clubs. Jokers are wild, and they have 2 impacts on that round of combat. First, if someone pulls a joker, everyone involved in the combat, and from what I read, I think this is also the NPCs that are there, get a Benny. So that's one way that you get a new benefit inside the game. And then second, a joker is able to go whenever they want in that initiative. So if they see an advantageous position for them to attack, they can do it whenever they want. Drawing a joker is something that's really celebratory, especially because there's only 2 of them in the deck. Combat is tactical. It assumes that you're using the standard, I think, 28 millimeter minis. And in it, 1 inch equals 2 yards. And that's assumed. In fact, inside the book, every distance is given in terms of inches. You're going all the way back to like old school AD&D at this point. It's a war game mentality. The combat rules themselves are very, very simple, and they are fast. They are also intricate, and they have a lot of moving parts that you can push in and out of combat depending on the situation. So there's a lot to keep track of, even though the mechanic itself is simple. I know the first time that I read through Savage Worlds, I'm learning a new system. I'm trying to figure out how all these different bits are working together. Reading through the combat section kind of made my eyes glaze over a bit. It was a little confusing. The second time I read through the section, it made a lot more sense. So here's my recommendation for you. If you're reading through combat and you're going, whoa, this is too many things to keep track of, well, just skim through it and get the general gist of it, and then later go back and do some more in-depth reading. It's just one of those hazards that comes from learning a new system. Don't feel discouraged when there's all these different things that get thrown at you like you're sucking on a fire hose. So damage in game is really rather interesting. There's no hit points. You do attack, you're trying to beat the target's toughness score, and anytime you exceed the target's toughness score, they are going to be shaken. This is a really interesting concept because a shaken character can only take free actions. They can't take a full action to attack or cast a spell or activate powers. They can only do things like walk a little bit and drink. This is a really nice effect on the game. If you hit a target and you exceed their toughness score by 4, you get a raise. If you do it by another multiple of 4, you can get another raise on that. And every raise is going to inflict a wound on the character. If a character is shaken and takes another hit, that also inflicts a wound on them. Wounds do things like inflict penalties on characters' rolls. And wildcards, like the PCs and significant NPCs, can absorb 3 wounds before they are incapacitated. At that point, they are down, unconscious, and bleeding out, probably dying. They also have to roll on a vigor table to see if they suffer an injury. Damage can also be soaked by spending a Benny. You spend that and make a vigor roll. If you succeed, you don't take the wound from that hit, although you are shaken. If you succeed with a raise, you can erase that wound and also erase the shaken status. All told, I think the way the damage is handled in this game is really interesting because there's a mix of ways to avoid damage and take damage. There's danger to it and a way to get out of danger, all blended into this mix that creates this really intense, fast-moving system inside combat. It's a tough nut to crack, and I think they did a really good job with it. Now, this game is not all done in ancient fantasy. You can see from the cover that there's modern elements to it. So they have what's called a powers system inside Savage Worlds. You get your powers by taking on an arcane background, which is not necessarily magic, it's just shorthand for any way that you get powers inside the game. If you take that arcane background and then you buy the prerequisite skill that's required to use it, you can then buy different powers inside the game in order to unleash into the world. So every arcane background has its own list of starting powers and a number of power points that you're able to spend. The way that you use your powers is to spend your power points, and then you are going to unleash the power into the world. Spent power points are recovered at about 5 per hour of rest. Now, one thing I love about Savage Worlds, and this is something that I was giving a minor ding to in the Cypher System Core rulebook, the powers are genuinely genre neutral, at least pretty much all of them. So the mechanics stay the same no matter what setting you are in, but the narrative description of them change. This is one of the things that I fell in love with Open Legend, and Savage Worlds holds on to it as well. I like the idea of a genreless system not having to try to explain every power in every different possible setting that you can be in. It's just going to trust you to say, yeah, this is a skill, but this is a hero type world or an adventure type world or a magic type world, and therefore this is how I am describing my power being activated. It doesn't change the math, it just changes the role play. That's really good. So this is a nice, flexible, really fun to pick up system. There's a little bit of design or organizational quirks in it. Let me give you the one example that really stood out for me. Race is such a big part of designing your character because that's how you're going to take your hindrances and then give you your edges, which give you special bonuses or benefits inside game. And so that's a big deal. But because Savage Worlds is genre agnostic, when they give you a whole bunch of sample races inside that section of the book, they also felt the need to give you instructions on how to create your own race or your own cultural background. And it's really simple, it's built up very well, and it's easy to follow. But it breaks the flow of the character design section. Because right after that, you have hindrances, which are like the opposite of edges. They're going to give you penalties or negative benefits inside the game. And I was having difficulty at that point from differentiating that. Now I was talking about a character, whereas before I was talking about the race. It just broke the flow enough that my brain had a little bit of trouble doing that gymnastic from talking character to talking race to talking character again. I really would have put probably the race generation materials before character development because it is so important, and then allow the character development process to flow much better. That's the biggest example of this inside Savage Worlds, but every now and again, they're just points where I had to remind myself to take a breath and say, okay, wait, no, we're talking about a different concept now. We've shifted subjects. And just the way that the game is designed in some points, it was a little bit hard to follow. Very minor glitch, and once I got used to it, I was quite able to read the book, but that was the one example that really drove me nuts for a bit. Hi, Next Day Wes here at home with a different microphone, and I have an update on the way races are put into the character development process, because the way they were structured, it has even switched up my vocabulary for talking about the creation of races. See, I was calling the creation of races the negative attributes hindrances. Those are character attributes. That's for a negative modifier to rolls. When you are creating a race that has a negative attribute, it's just called a negative racial attribute, and that's it. And see, the way that they're scrunched together in the book right next to each other has gotten my mind conflating these two different concepts together. That's one of the reasons why I would take the race creation process and put it at the beginning of the book. Just a thought. Let's go back to the regular video. This is a beautiful book. It is an interesting system. I think it would be very fast to play at the table and offer a whole lot of fun for both players and the GM. Very worth picking up. And if you want to pick it up for yourself, the hardback and PDF combo is on sale at Pinnacle Entertainment Group's website right now for $39.99. If you want the PDF by itself, that's only $10. This is not a huge buy-in for a really cool game. And then if you want to add on some of the different settings books after that, well, you can do that too. I highly recommend checking this game out. So what do I have coming up for the system? Well, I am currently reading Index Card RPG. I'm so happy that that finally got here in the mail. And I am also reading Numenera Destiny, which takes a look at more of the domain level play for that setting inside the Cypher System flagship product. Looking forward to getting through that and reviewing both of those books for you. That's going to take a little bit because there's a lot of material there to go through. In the meantime, I'm also going to be demonstrating the new cave maker for Dungeon Alchemist, which takes a method that folks were using to make caves inside that application and now makes it a core part of the product. It makes it a lot easier to do. I'm really impressed with it, and I can't wait to show it off with all of you. Also, I've been doing a live stream on Thursdays at noon. When I remember what time it is and don't misread a clock, you can go ahead and watch episode 3 of my skipping lunch live stream to see what that means. But I've been doing that on Thursdays. This week I'm going to be doing it on a Wednesday because I have some friends that want to get together for lunch. And I talk about stories at my table and give examples and short overviews of some products that I've got on my shelf that I've been waiting to demonstrate for everyone. If you want to come out for that, I would love to have you in the live chat. But until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.